Okay, I think we're live. We're coming to you here from professional baseball instruction in Upper Saddle River with our first question and answer live here with myself. My name is Eric DAgati, along here with Steve Hayward, founder of the Baseball Health Network. We sent out a question and answer survey just on Monday, and we've gotten over 100 responses already, and more are coming in every minute. So we're going to try to get to as many of these questions as possible. We'll obviously not get to them all, but we are going to get to them all at some point. Whatever ones we don't get to tonight, we're going to address with individual videos, as well as a lot of these are actually addressed in the videos we've already shot that are ready to go live on January 11th. So I'll let Steve open up and give a short introduction, and then we'll start getting through the questions.
Well, hi guys, my name is Steve, and I'm very excited to see the responses that we've gotten so far at this point. And the questions there's a lot of great questions. Like you said, there's a couple hundred questions out there. And again, like you said, we've answered a lot of them already and things we've done previously. But it's good to see that there's so many people that are being vigilant on the problems that we're seeing in youth sports. And you know, my vision in creating the Baseball Health Network was to help as many people as possible. So I'm really excited that we're finally getting this off the ground. I'm excited to see that there's so many people that are interested in this. And, you know, like you said, we're going to get to as many questions as we can. Again, thank you guys so much for, you know, buying into this and understanding that there's a huge need for the Baseball Health Network.
Okay, so there's a couple different categories that we've got questions in. And as I said, we have a bunch from here. So I'm going to start just plowing through them. Now, some of these are already addressed in some of the videos that we've shot already. So like as an example, got a question here. It's a more intricate question that asked, how do you address too much thoracic extension in throwers? We actually have an entire 10-minute video just on extension, on how to assess it on yourself or assess it on another player, as well as some drills on how to improve its extension. Now, specifically to that question, you know, and I brought it up to Steve, is you generally don't see too much extension in throwers. The thoracic extension, for those of you who don't know, you have three primary sections of your spine. You have from your neck being one here. Thank you, Steve, for being my model. Your upper back being two. This is the thoracic spine, basically from the top of the rib cage to the bottom of the rib cage. And then you have the lumbar spine, which is the low back. Well, that thoracic spine is an out curve as opposed to the two in curves here. And what we're talking about with extension is the ability to reverse that curve and extend. Well, what you see here is you remember that these pitchers, as much as they may throw, is that most of the time they're not up on a mound. They're sitting at a desk. They're sitting on the couch. And a lot of times they're hunched forward. So they're stuck more in flexion. So we really don't see a ton of extension. If anything, I'd like to get more extension with them. And that's what our video talks about.
The first question I took is it's a pretty serious question. It's an injury question, and it's how would you address a partial UCL tear? Surgery or no surgery? What would be the criteria one way or the other? A UCL tear is what is known as Tommy John surgery. It's the ligament that essentially attaches the lower arm to the upper arm. It basically, on every pitch that's thrown, that ligament, it goes to almost to failure every time. So it's a pretty vulnerable area, especially if you're having other deficiencies throughout your body. So to answer that question, I've had several guys over the years with partial UCL tears. And my answer to you would be this. It depends on, number one, where you are in your career. If you're a high school kid and you know, you might want to get that surgery as soon as possible and get it out of the way so you can move on. I had a college kid with the same situation who was in the senior year of college, and we kind of worked through it. There's PRP injections that are pretty effective dealing with that. But you definitely want to see a qualified doctor to make sure of the level of those tears. And, you know, it's all going to depend on where you are in your career, really. And if you want to try to push through it, eventually you're obviously going to, it's going to go. So the question to you is, do you want to get it done and get it out of the way? Or do you want to try to see how long you can maintain that, like the pitcher for the Yankees? What was his name? Masahiro Tanaka. And he seems to be doing well. And he had the PRP injections. I had two of those myself, and they're very effective. So, you know, you definitely want to see a qualified doctor. Dr. Ahmad is you know, in our minds is the king of the hill. So, you know, definitely make sure you see a qualified doctor to help you with that decision.
One more note I'll add on the UCL tears is a misconception in a topic that has actually come up is actually getting the surgery done preemptively, because what they find is that the myth is that you come back throwing harder after getting UCL surgery. That it's not a product of the surgery itself. what it generally is a product of is when you get this done, it's a very, very intensive, and Steve can speak to it more. And we're going to have entire videos showing a rehab program from a UCL tear. And when you get this done, you have to spend so much more time working on your mechanics and working on your body and working on preparation, and you become so much more in tune that a lot of the result is because of just better physical preparation leading up to it. That's why you're throwing harder. It's not because of the surgery itself. So next question I have is a lot of these things, and I've said in the videos and I'll say in some of our launch videos, they hit home for me because Steve is a father of 4 young boys. I'm the father of 2. My boys are 15 and 12 and play a lot of competitive baseball. So this question I completely can relate to. It's how to properly prevent kids that are playing on 2, 3, or 4 teams from overworking their arms. Now, we're in a situation because of the numbers dropping off in baseball. What's happening is a lot of the town leagues, the little leagues, and the Cal Ripken leagues, in order to keep their numbers up, they're requiring that travel players have to also play in their rec programs. And because of that, you're forced to now play on 2 teams at minimum to play travel. Now, what happens is now you have a situation where you have a young boy who's 11 or 12 years old who's getting caught in this tug of war between coaches and parents and friends as they show up to their rec game, and the coach is saying, hey, can I get you for 2 or 3 innings tonight? I know that because in coaching teams, I will always communicate with the parents and say, look, did your son pitch it all and travel this week? If they did, I'm going to say, what kind of innings did they throw, and where are they at, and how far are we away, and when are they going to pitch again? Now, not all rec coaches, because they're dads who are volunteers, are going to ask that question. So to answer the question here, the onus comes on the parents. And it is really on you to monitor your son, because I've seen kids, and one of my main drivers to want to do this for the Baseball Health Network, my son is a freshman in high school right now. He has 4 kids who he grew up playing with who have already had arm surgeries at 14, 15 years old. Okay, and a lot of that is because they weren't really monitored, because mom and dad didn't really know any better, and they let them pitch in the rec.
My next question. This is a great question, and there's a little bit of controversy when it comes to it, but it's how important are pitch counts? And I'm not a huge pitch count guy when it comes to my players that I train and I coach, because I know what type of conditioning that they're in. Pitch counts have absolutely made a positive impact on the arm injury epidemic. I don't think it's had quite the effect that they were hoping it was going to have. And it's for this reason. Pitch count is solely based on age. So we're going to take 3 12-year-old kids. A 12-year-old kid that plays multiple sports. He's in great shape. He's always doing something. He's physically in great condition. Another kid that's in decent condition. And you take a kid that's in poor condition. They're all the same age. One kid throws all the time. One kid's thrown a few times. Another kid picks up a glove 2 days before the season starts. Because of their age, they're all in the same pitch count. So how do we justify based on age? What I think should happen with pitch counts is, like Eric said, the parents have to be somewhat responsible for this, and they have to have communication with coaches. It should be based on what you did in the prior season. So if a kid comes to me and we start to throw, I say, well, how many times have you thrown a baseball in the last month or 2? Well, I've thrown a baseball twice in the last month. Well, then I know exactly how much throwing we're going to do that day. So it's basically based on what you did the previous season. So here in the Northeast, what you did in the wintertime, what you're doing right now up until March 1st should dictate what your pitch count should be, not your age. So if a kid has gone out there and he's thrown a couple times a week and he's throwing consistently and he's throwing some high intensity bullpens and he's throwing up to 60, 70 pitches, several times before the season, then he's probably conditioned at those 75 to 85, 90, maybe 90 pitches. But if the kid's throwing a baseball 5 or 6 times, he's throwing 2 bullpens at 50% intensity level and through 30 pitches both times, how do I justify putting him out there for 75 pitches? He's not physically conditioned to throw 75 pitches. So pitch count should be dictated by what you do prior to that season. And that's one of the things that we have to really, again, the parents have to get involved, and the parents have to communicate with coaches to let them know exactly where their kid is physically before we can dictate a pitch count.
Okay, so next question I have here is in terms of looking at, in terms of avoiding throwing injuries, what is your understanding of the best exercises for gaining, maintaining shoulder strength and endurance? And there's a couple like this. There's another one, you know, what are the top 5 shoulder exercises that every pitcher should be performing? Ironically, we're going to be launching next week with a free 5-part video series, and it's titled The Top 5 Things That Every Pitcher Should Be Able to Do. And so some of that will be addressed in there. But, you know, the big thing that you're going to hear a lot from us is everybody's asking for these magical shoulder exercises. And what you're going to find is that a lot of it has nothing to do with the shoulder or arm. Most of these shoulder and arm injuries are really not about the shoulder and arm. It's about everything from the foundation in your foot and ankle, going all the way up through the chain, through your core, and out through your arm and shoulder. And usually when you have an arm or shoulder injury, it's because something else in that chain is breaking down and not connected that we're seeing all the arm injuries. So one of the topics of these videos is me talking about a simple push-up and how much you can learn from that in terms of how your body communicates from your hand up through your arm, into your shoulder, into your trunk, all the way to your feet, and then back down the chain. And that's a huge part to understand, is that this is not just about the shoulder and arm. You can have the strongest shoulder and arm in the world, but if it's not attached to a functional and operating musculoskeletal system, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, big question. When is it okay to throw a curveball? The curveball has gotten a really bad rap over the years. It's been blamed for all these arm injuries. There have been dozens of studies by the top guys in the world trying to prove, not necessarily prove, but trying to disprove or prove how the curveball has affected arm injuries. And not one study has ever proven that a curveball is more stressful than any other pitch. And I believe that. I've always believed that. I believe you should start throwing a curveball when you can consistently throw your fastball for strikes, when you can consistently control your body towards home plate, maintain your direction, utilize your lower body, getting the separation from your hips and your upper body. I've taught kids as early as 10 years old to throw curveballs. And when you say that, people get 10 years old. Just because I'm teaching a kid how to throw a curveball doesn't mean he's allowed to throw it in games. I don't think young kids should throw really any other pitches until they're 12 or 13, other than fastballs, until they get that consistency in games. We want to build arm strength. We want to create arm health. But you can start to develop a curveball at an early age. You know, when kids come in here with me, they'll throw curveballs only here. And we'll throw maybe 10 or 12, maybe 15 curveballs. But I'm trying to get them to understand the rotation. I'm trying to get them to understand what a curveball is all about. Because let's face it, kids are going to be trying to throw curveballs at the field with their friends. And anytime you see kids trying to throw curveballs, they're always doing this. They're coming around the ball. They're getting on the side of it, getting underneath it. That's when we're going to create more stress in the elbow. So any pitch thrown improperly with poor mechanics is going to add stress to the arm. In a lot of situations, especially with kids that throw the ball harder, it's more stress on your elbow throwing a hard fastball than there is throwing a nice slow curveball. So again, when you can control your body, you can control your fastball, you can maintain your direction, you can start to develop a curveball. Not necessarily throw them in games, but you can start to develop a curveball. And if you're underneath supervision, you can throw the curveball, pretty consistently. But again, let's focus on first developing our fastball, then learning some type of a changeup, because the changeup also has the same arm speed as a fastball. So again, we're maintaining the arm speed and we're building that arm health up. And then when they get to the right age, then they can really start throwing it more competitively in games.
Okay, we got a lot of really good questions specific to young players. So we're going to bounce back and forth, and the Baseball Health Network content is going to be for players of all ages. But we'll focus a little bit for a minute on young players. Got a ton of questions, and one of them is here, is what type of off-the-field workouts or training are recommended for youths 9 through 12? The one thing I can say is that it should be synergistic with what's happening in practice. In practice, there's so many fundamentals that need to be learned in this game. And as someone who coaches it at the youth level, I can tell you that the one thing that's a dead giveaway that you have a coach that doesn't get it is when you see the players running a lot. And my joke has always been in any sport is that having your players, players running laps is for coaches who ran out of stuff to teach. Okay. There's too much to cover and too little time to cover all the intrinsic elements of baseball that when you're at baseball practice, you should be learning baseball. In terms of off the field stuff, the thing we'll talk a lot about, and we talk about in a ton of our videos, we have an entire video dedicated just to youth training. And Steve talks about what he does with his kids specifically and just some fun stuff. But the one thing that we'll talk about over and over is become more athletic. And so some of the most simple things can make you more athletic. And what I would recommend is the less structured, the better. Okay. And it could be something as simple. One of the best ways when people ask me, because I get asked all the time by parents at games, what's some of the best things I can do to improve speed? And they want to automatically go out and buy ladders and sleds and bags, and all those things could be useful tools at some point. But the first thing I tell them is go out and get a jump rope. Learn to jump rope, because there's a rhythmic element to being able to move athletically and fast. It teaches you to get up on the power pad of your foot. It teaches you to create some spring, and as well as the proper stiffness in the foot and ankle. So simple things like jumping rope is invaluable in terms of what you can do to improve athleticism. Climbing, doing those sorts of things, being able to do all those, be on the monkey bars and do stuff at the park, as you'll see with some of the footage we have of Steve's kids. That's invaluable, doing those things. Those are the type of things that are going to make a huge difference. And, one of the other reasons why I wanted to get this information out is because that's the conversation I'll end up having on the fence at games, is they'll say, oh, I want to get my son working out. I bought him a bench at Sports Authority. And it's like, okay, let's back up here a second. You go return the bench to Sports Authority. All right. And let's talk about what they really need to do. I can get everything done that you need to do with your 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old with their own body weight, a jump rope, maybe a medicine ball, and maybe a kettlebell and some bands. And that's it. And so it really doesn't require a whole lot. You don't have to go out and get fancy gym memberships. And even though I've been training young athletes for the last 18 years, there's not a huge need to get it so organized and structured that we're worried about your 60 time when you're 11 years old. It just, those aren't the values that we're looking for. Become athletic.
And just be kids. Like they said, like my kids, we go to the park and I put them through obstacle courses, and, it's not like anything structured. It's just, let's go to the park. Hey, run over there, jump over the bench, go across the monkey bars, go up that slide, down that slide, jump over that, roll in the dirt. And it's just all fun. I get a stopwatch and we time it, and it's all fun stuff. Again, teach athleticism. Teach kids how to understand their bodies better, how to understand how to move, how to roll, how to jump out of a tree, not a high tree, but jump out of a tree. Get dirty, slide in the dirt. Just be kids. When I was a kid, we played about 7 different sports a day. You played street hockey for 2 hours, then you punted a football for an hour and a half, then you played wiffle ball, basketball. You're constantly just playing sports and just being athletic and having fun. It doesn't have to be some structured regimen that we're putting our young kids on. Let them be kids, but keep them active. And in turn, they're going to understand their bodies better. They're going to understand hand-eye coordination. They're going to understand how to shoot a basketball. Well, they don't play basketball. So what? Let them shoot a basketball. It's an athletic movement. It's an athletic skill that they can learn to get better at, focusing on the form. All of that stuff is going to help them become more athletic, and it's going to get their body in better condition to limit the number of injuries that we're seeing.
You take the next one?
I'll take the next one. The question is about I have an 8-year-old son, and should we be focusing more on velocity or throwing different pitches? My son was 8 years old last year, and how many times a week should he throw was the question. And we had a tournament that was being played over Mother's Day or something, and I've always told my kids, when you're pitching, you don't need to throw the ball hard. Sometimes when you're out there, you feel good, you can throw the ball hard. Let's not focus on speed. Let's focus on throwing the ball over home plate. Whether it's high or low, let's focus on throwing it straight. So he pitched a game at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. And the coaches say, is he okay to pitch? I said, yeah, he's okay to pitch later. So later in the day, he went out and he pitched 2 mornings. Then on Sunday, he pitched 2 mornings later in the day. And people say, wow, he's pitching 3 days in a row. I said, he's not pitching. He's throwing the ball. He wasn't getting a high leg kick and coming through and driving through the ball. He was picking up his leg and going like this. And he was throwing the ball over home plate. So to me, and I asked him, how's your arm feel? he wasn't really necessarily pitching the ball. And I don't need to be teaching him to pitch the ball right now. I need him to throw the ball straight, start to understand some of the basic movements of the pitching mechanics. And that's another question, my next question I'll get to. But it's not about lifting up his leg and creating that momentum and trying to get more velocity, because I don't care about that right now. What I care about is he gets consistency with his arm action. He starts to understand how to use his lower body a little bit better, rotating his hips, maintaining his direction towards the plate. To me, that's the most important thing. So people thought, wow, this guy's a baseball guy. He's letting his kid pitch twice in the same day and then pitch the next day. Again, if he was out there really driving the ball and following through and pulling through the ball, I wouldn't have done that. But as I'm watching him throw, I'm saying he's not really pitching the ball. He's just throwing it over the plate. So when you're an 8-year-old kid, you don't have to worry about other pitches. Work on a 4-seam fastball. Make sure their thumb is underneath the ball. A lot of kids hold the ball off to the side. Make sure the rotation is consistent. That's the stuff that you want to work on, because that's the stuff as when they start to throw the ball harder, that's going to affect their elbow when they're coming around the ball and they're turning the ball inside too much. So we want to make sure that they're consistently through the ball, whether it's 4-seam or 2-seam, and that's the only pitch they need to worry about. And they want to throw them right down the middle of the home plate. You know, people think you want to throw to the corners. When you get a young kid, you put the catcher in the center of home plate. He's got 8.5 inches that way and 8.5 inches that way to make a mistake. So if he's aiming for the middle of the plate, it doesn't mean it's going to end up in the middle of the plate. But you're going to give your kid a much better chance of throwing strikes. So focus on throwing strikes, focus on throwing the ball with consistent rotation. Make sure they're following through. Make sure their arm action is nice and smooth. That's the only thing you should be worried about with kids up until 10 years old.
And the funny thing is, I'll always say, next time, you hear somebody talking about, oh, well, I got to get my 9-year-old to hit his spots and change up their different pitches. And I'll say, do me a favor, come watch me throw batting practice to my team. I'm trying to throw it right down the middle every single time. See how many of those guys are ripping the ball all over the field every single time. If so, they're not doing it at that age. Now, as they get older and their hitting skill gets better, yeah, you got to move it around. But at the young ages, the chances of them hitting it every single time. Remember, at the other end, you have a hitter who's just as inexperienced as the pitcher. Put it right down the middle of the plate and make them have to try to hit it. It's not as easy as you think on the other end. Got a couple good questions here, but going back to the injuries, we have tons of injury questions. There are two that kind of tie together is that why does it seem like there's so many more arm injuries to pitchers in recent years, despite the fact that teams are so careful not to overuse them? That's number one. The fact that we're trying not to overuse them is somewhat true. The problem is that the places where they're trying not to overuse them, what you see at the professional level, where they're being somewhat babied, as some people would say, by that point, generally it's too late. All that accumulated stress is already there. And so that's why, when you look at some of the baseball experts, Buck Showalter has said he does not want to recruit baseball-only kids. And we'll talk about that. We have some great questions on specialization, because he knows that wear and tear is accumulated, and he's going to break down on his dime. So that's one issue there. So where it's not being monitored is the youth and high school level, where kids are jumping from team to team to team. And Steve can tell you as a coach, if the parent's not coming in and saying, hey, my kid threw last week, he's not aware of where they're at in terms of volume. And so that's where it becomes an issue. That's number one. Number two, it says, are they just getting diagnosed more often? And in the past, did they play through injuries? To a certain extent, that's true. And that because everybody is so much more aware and there's so much more of a social conscious about arm injuries, that ESPN is a 24-hour-a-day channel. And I have kids that I coach in all youth sports that are coming up to me and rattling off, like a 10-year-old that knows about what an ACL is and knows about concussions and knows about UCL and Tommy John surgery. You didn't see that 15, 20, 25 years ago. It's so much more in the social consciousness that now we're much more aware of it. There's much more of a apprehension with it. So in football, I coach youth football. As soon as there is any kind of head trauma or contact, we immediately are taught to pull the player out. And if there's any question at all, they're removed from the game. Where when I grew up and played, if you got dinged or you got your bell rung, you stepped out for a play. If you did that at all, you shook it off and you went back in. Now immediately, if there's any kind of head trauma, not only do we pull them out, but we go up to mom and dad and say, look, I need you to watch them over the next 24 hours or depending on the severity, say you should probably go get them checked out. And obviously, if he goes, now he gets a diagnosis that he would have never gotten 20 years ago because he's not going there. So the same thing happens as soon as we start to feel arm pain. If we're rushing in and we're getting it checked out, maybe we are catching some stuff that wasn't there before. But there's a huge change in the culture of all youth sports, not just baseball, why you're seeing this increase in injuries on all different fronts.
All right, pitching mechanics. There's many different theories on pitching mechanics. Which ones do you think are the best? First of all, there is no one way to teach every kid. You know, we're not trying to build robots. There are certain consistencies that need to be there. We definitely need to have good balance. The old school theory of balance is when you pick up your leg and you're able to hold it for 10 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever. And that gets a bad rap. And my theory of balance is when you pick up your front leg, is your back foot stable? Or is your back foot wobbling? Is your big toe up off the ground and your foot's shaking around? We need to make sure, number one, that our back foot is stable, because our back foot is the only part of our body touching the ground at that point. So if that's stable, we're going to be able to control our bodies better. Getting back to holding up your knee, the old school balance thought process. I have no issue teaching kids to do that. I know by doing that they're not going to throw the ball as fast as they're capable of. But if I'm teaching a kid to do that, it's because he has poor control of his body. He has poor understanding of how to use his body properly. So by teaching a kid to go through his motion slower, you are absolutely affecting their velocity negatively. It's going to be lower. But who cares? Why do I care how fast a kid can throw if he's throwing balls all over the place? You know, that was me as a kid. I threw the ball really fast as a young kid my whole life. And I'd hit the backstop 9 times a game. My head was over here. So it was great that I could throw the ball fast. But if I couldn't throw strikes and I was out there throwing 27, 31 pitch innings every time, I was just doing damage to myself. So I have no issue with working on holding up your balance and then coming down and then sliding it out. For beginners, when you get to a certain level, then you want to start to create more momentum. When you have that control of your body, when you have an understanding how to use your body properly, how to get that hip to shoulder separation, how to get that trunk extension to stay through the ball. When you're able to do that, that's when we start to get that early momentum. When my front leg comes up, as soon as my foot comes off the ground, my body's moving forward. And that's when we're going to start to generate a little more velocity, and we're going to get, you know, be able to stay through the ball longer, get better rotation on the ball, get a better angle on the ball. So mechanics, it's not like we're trying to build robots here. We don't want to take the athleticism away from some kids. Having said that, there are certain kids that do things mechanically not very good. Okay, things that we wouldn't necessarily teach a kid to do, but sometimes it's the mechanical inefficiencies that make somebody effective. So let's say I have a junior in high school who throws 73 miles an hour, and he's looking to play in college. Well, when he steps straight, his ball's straight as an arrow at 73, 74. So he's in big trouble. Sometimes the kids will step across their body a little bit, something you wouldn't necessarily teach a kid to do. And that is some Bumgarner, some bunch of guys in the big league step across their body. So would I necessarily want to change that in a kid? You know, would I want to take that, if he steps across his body, he's going to create some more movement on his pitches, which without that movement, he's probably not pitching. And I've had this conversation many times over with players and parents that, yes, it's going to create a little bit more stress on his arm, but it's going to make it more effective. So there's really no one way to do it. I would say the most basic things we need to do is, number one, control our back foot, make sure that our body is straight, make sure when we land that our front leg is stable, that we're driving into our front leg, and that we're getting out through the ball. Those are the things that are the most important. But to categorize every single person in a mechanics, a specific way of doing it, it's just not realistic, and it's not the best way to help every kid.
Now, some of the stuff talking about mechanics, some of the interesting stuff we've done already with our videos, and that'll launch when we launch on the 11th, is we've taken elements of the of pitching mechanics and we've broken them down, and we've taken just that, taken the balance point as an example, is one entire video where we break down all the elements of the balance point and then give you specific drills to improve your balance point. So if as you're working on it, you find that that's your weak link, we have specific drills just to improve that aspect of your mechanics. So we have the balance point, we have the landing point, we talk about that push-pull action, we talk about separating and creating trunk rotation. All those things are all different videos that we're going to be having on there in terms of mechanics. question on here that we have is we're going to go to one for the catchers. As a former catcher and my son's a catcher, got to rep those guys here with a question. And what is the best way to protect catcher's knees? And I wish I knew then what I know now, and I wouldn't have a creaky left knee like I do. But when we look at any joint issues, you always look above and below. So when we have a shoulder issue, like I said, most of the times I don't look at the shoulder. What I'm looking at is above, and a lot of times I'll look at the neck as being one of the areas that we'll address. And then below, I'm going to look at the thoracic spine and rib cage and how well that connects and everything in the trunk, okay? With your knee, you have above, you have your hip is your primary joint above that and all the muscles that are attached to the hip, as well as the foot and ankle and all the muscles attached there. Most of the times what we're seeing is either a lack of mobility where you have very stiff ankles, or very stiff hips. If you don't have good mobility in either of those joints, you're going to try to make up for it someplace else, and you're going to put excessive stress on your knee. So that's one issue if it's a mobility issue. On the other side of the coin, you have stability or motor control issues, meaning you don't know how to control or stabilize or have even the base strength in those areas. You can't stabilize on your foot and ankle, or you have very loose, unstable hips because of weak core and trunk muscles, and because of that, you hang on your joints, for lack of a better term, and so that's going to add a lot of stress. So the first key is to make sure you have good ankle and hip mobility, and we're going to go through drills in our videos on how to improve that, and then from there you have to be stronger. And I noticed that even with my knees after the fact, that the stronger I keep my lower body, the less my knee bothers me. If I'm doing a lot of traveling or teaching and I don't get to train, that's when my knee starts to hurt. So the key with that is keeping a strong and mobile lower half is the biggest key to protect catcher's knees.
Okay. How should parents act at their child's game? That's probably the question of the night.
That was me and Steve's favorite question.
Yeah, and it's a great question. Again, I'm a dad, and I've created a rule for myself, and it's just shut up. That's what I tell myself. When I want to say something, I don't say it. Okay. If my kid does something great, I'm there. Hey man, good. If he does something that, he fails, he strikes out, he makes a bad pitch. As much as I want to say something, I just don't say anything. Your kid already knows what he did wrong. You yelling it from the stands, how is that going to have any positive impact on what just happened? He already feels bad enough about what happened as it is. And then he's got the anxiety and the worry about you commenting on it. There's so many kids that walk up to home plate, they walk out to the mound, and they're so afraid to fail because they're afraid how you're going to act. They're afraid what you're going to say. So don't say anything. I go to my kids' games. I go down the right field line. I try to cheer for all the kids. When my kids get in the car, you're grabbing the steering wheel and you're like, all right, I'm going to say it. Don't say it. Just leave your kid alone. Let him figure it out on his own. There's too much, I think they call it helicopter parenting or something is the term. My parents came to all my games, and, they were always there for me. If I needed to talk to them about stuff, they were great. But you know what? They backed off. They let me figure it out by myself. It's such like this competitive thing. And I got to tell you, I really fully believe this because I've been around this for a long time. I think the parents are more embarrassed for themselves socially because Johnny made the error that cost their team. They're more focused on how people are perceiving them, that they're taking out on Johnny. Johnny's a kid. He's just playing a game. So if he makes a mistake, if he strikes out with the bases loaded looking, he didn't want to do that. Now, if your kid's being lazy, if he's not paying attention, if he's being disrespectful, if he's joking around the bench when he shouldn't be doing that, that's when you should say something. Not necessarily right there. But that's when I think parents have the right to step in. Other than that, when it comes to their sports, let the coaches handle it. Step away from it. If you're a coach, I'm a coach. I help out my kids' teams. I don't officially ever coach my kids' teams, but somehow I always find myself getting involved when guys ask me. If I have something to say to my kids, I tell one of the other coaches to go tell it to them. If I really want to say something to them, go tell them to do this. Why do I want to get myself involved? Why do I want to have a situation where I'm causing a problem between me and my son? Then I go home and then mom's mad at me because I'm mad at the kid. He's mad. It's a disaster. Be your kid's fan, okay? If you want to help them out in the backyard, you want to throw them balls and give them advice, that's one thing. But when you go to the game, behave yourself. We had a situation this past fall. That was probably one of the most embarrassing things that I've ever seen. A woman screaming, cursing, saying really bad stuff, that the cops had to show up. This was a 9U baseball game. My kids were on the team. My kids didn't want to go back. They were scared by what happened. The kid's mother, he was standing at home plate waiting to hit while this was all going on. And I said to myself, what is wrong with people? Why do people have to get so caught up in all this stuff? It is awesome that you go to your kids' game. I go to my kids' 10-year-old football games, and you're fired up. It's awesome. It's a great thing to experience. Lay off your kid. Let other people tell him what he needs to work on. Let his coaches do their jobs, okay? And maybe they're not full-time coaches. Maybe they're guys that are volunteering. And if it wasn't for guys like that, there wouldn't be baseball leagues. So back off, be your kid's fan, and take my advice. Take my Steve advice. When you feel like you got to say something, just shut up. Let your kid be a kid. Let him learn his lessons on his own, and just be his fan and be a supporter, please. There's way too much of this going on. It's getting worse and worse. And who's suffering? The kids are. Your own kids are suffering for it. So let's stop the nonsense. Go to the game. And if you can't handle it, if you can't control yourself, don't go to the game. Find out what happened when he gets home. But please, just do the right thing by your kid.
And to echo that, the other thing that makes it tough, and I could tell you, and I'm sure Steve could tell you as a coach as well, is coaching your son from the stands or coaching him from the fence is not only tough on the coach, but it's extremely tough on them. There's a difference between coaching and providing triggers. Okay, so if I'm working with my son on keeping his palm up on his swing that week, or when we were in BP that day, and when he gets up to the plate and I just say palm up, and that just creates a mental trigger for him to remember what we're working on. That's different from than me saying, come on, throw strikes. That's the best one. Yeah. Throw strikes. Oh, you mean I'm not supposed to bounce it off the plate or hit the top of the backstop? I thought I was supposed to. Of course I'm trying to throw strikes here. You don't need to throwing strikes or we talked about, we have our pitching healthy program here, and we have a video talking about just breathing. And when I hear, mom or dad say, breathe, what does that mean? I'm not holding my breath. So I don't know what you mean by that. So all you're doing is confusing me on the mound. So we actually talk about the importance of breathing, and we're going to talk about how to teach yourself how to breathe properly depending on the situation you're in. So when we look at a question that Steve and I looked at, there's a question here: how do I work on my arm strength to increase my velocity? And Steve can talk a little bit about it from the baseball side of things. And it's not actually arm strength, it's arm speed. But from my side of things is being, working on the performance side, is that it's the same thing I said earlier. If you want to throw the ball harder, get everything stronger. There's an article that we're going to have posted on the site, some research they did at Ohio State, and it said one of the biggest predictors of velocity was the strength of the lower half and the impact you were getting with your front leg and landing. So if you want to throw harder, it's not about your arm and shoulder. It's about getting everything stronger and having a strong lower half. Now, where that gets lost is where I can't tell you how many times we have coaches that say, oh, I need to build up your legs, so we're going to have you run a lot. Okay, that is not the answer. Okay, I don't need my pitchers to be able to run 6 miles. Okay, unless they're going to go out for cross country in the fall, there's no reason for them to run 6 miles. I always joke, the only time your pitcher ever would run 5 miles or even a mile is if the team bus breaks down on the way to the game and it's a mile away from the nearest phone, then they have to run a mile. Other than that, you don't have to run that far. The furthest you're ever going to run is 60 feet times 4. Okay, 240 feet is the furthest you're ever going to run. So there's no reason to have to run long distances, and that's not going to build up your legs. If that was the case, look at your next cross country runner or your marathon runner. Usually they're emaciated. They don't look with big, strong legs like you want to have to throw a powerful, explosive pitch. So running is not the answer necessarily to build up your legs, but you do need strong legs to throw the ball harder.
What we got?
Yeah, 2.
All right. What would I advise an 11-year-old to do when a shoulder wrist area is sore after pitching or throwing? Ice or heat? Anytime you do any type of working out, throwing, training, whatever, you're gonna deal with some level of soreness. That kind of comes with the territory. If it's a general soreness and it's a typical soreness, it's not anything more than it usually is, then there's no really need to worry about it. When it comes to icing or heat, I got to say I've never been an icing guy. When I was in college, we didn't ice, and I always felt that icing made my arm feel tighter. And I've been coaching high school baseball for, I think, 15 years. 2 varsity programs, St. Joe's Regional and Don Bosco Prep, two nationally ranked programs. And in all the years that I've been coaching high school baseball, not one single pitcher of mine has ever sustained a serious injury under my care. And a lot of those kids, I would say most of them, were big icers, always icing. And I never discouraged them from icing. But I always asked them, well, why do you ice? I don't know. They really don't. And they it gets rid of the inflammation. And to me, if my arm's not hurting me, if I don't feel physical pain, I really saw no need to ice. So the more and more kids that weren't icing, we're actually recovering faster. And again, I'm not telling you not to ice. If you're a person that puts ice on your arm and your arm feels great, then who am I to tell you not to do it? But what I am saying is there are so many players I've dealt with over the years that are just, as soon as they're done, we got to ice it. The kid throws a 25-pitch, 60% intensity bullpen, and as soon as he's done, he's loaded up with ice bags. Like, how much inflammation could possibly have come from that? You know what I'm saying? So whether you should ice or not, it's a preference. There was a guy that coined the phrase RICE, which was rest, ice, compression, and what was the last one?
Elevation.
Elevation, okay? 20 years later, the guy who coined that phrase said he was wrong. He doesn't necessarily believe in icing. So, again, there's no medical evidence or proof that says icing is better than not icing. It's been that way for a long time. Ice your arm, you feel this, ice your arm. So again, it's a preference. If you feel better from doing it and it makes your body feel right, nobody can tell you not to do it. The soreness, when we're done throwing, we're going to feel sore. How do I get rid of soreness? How would I teach my kids to get rid of soreness? Arm circles, bands. The question is the wrist. Some static stretches. You can work on just. We have videos on all this stuff coming out. But just to let you know, so you're going to feel stress. You're going to feel some soreness. Make sure that you get your body moving. Make sure that the next day, I knew when I was in high school, after I pitched in a game, I was always told, don't even touch a ball today. And I learned that was the worst thing I could do. If the next day after I threw, I would throw, and my arm would recover a lot faster. If I just threw and didn't pick up a baseball the next day and didn't do anything the next day, then my body just got tighter and tighter and tighter. So my goal was always to stay ahead of the soreness, to stay ahead of the tightness. And I felt the more activity that I did, low intensity, the more that I did, the faster I recovered.
Another thing I would add is we have a video series on foam rolling. And if you're not aware of how to do that, huge proponents of doing that. In an ideal world, if we were all big leaguers with an unlimited budget and time, we'd have our own personal massage therapist to work with us each day, but we don't have that. So with a very inexpensive tool called a foam roller, there's huge benefit that you can get out of that. And we have a couple videos that talk about how to foam roll pretty much from head to toe your entire body. So another topic that we have a bunch of questions on is specialization. Okay, and this is something that I think is a big link to a lot of the arm injuries that we're seeing. A lot of the injuries we're seeing across all sports is specialization in focusing on one sport, with the competitiveness of it, with the money aspect of it, with AAU teams and travel teams and all these organizations that benefit from year-round baseball play, is the specialization, plus the dreams of grandeur that parents and kids have, that they think, well, this is going to get me another look, and this is going to be the stepping stone to the next place. All these are factors that have led to this whole new culture of baseball. And that, it used to be that there was Little League, and then if you were good in Little League, you made the All-Stars, and that was pretty much it. And you were done, and then you had your summer vacation, and then you went on to your full sport. And now it's starting up where, kids are already training now in December, getting ready for their spring season that will pretty much flow all the way through up till Thanksgiving, and there's very little downtime in there. So there's obviously a huge correlation with that and with a rise in injuries. Now, with terms of specialization, I talked a little bit about Buck Showalter, where he will not draft one-sport baseball players. You see it across all sports. You look at Urban Meyer, who actually played baseball at a high level. The vast majority of his recruits, and he's got one of the best programs in the world, okay, for Ohio State football, he does not want to have single-sport athletes. Generally, what you'll find is a improved all-around athlete, both mentally and physically, with the kids who are playing different sports throughout the year. Now, some of the questions are talking about at what age do you recommend to focus really on one sport. Another question was when can you figure out that your child kind of quote unquote has it for the sport and now he needs to make this the priority. That's a tough one to call, and I'll let Steve chime in a minute. But I can't tell you how many kids that I've seen who their 12-year-old year, they were the next Babe Ruth. Okay, they hit 20 home runs and they were throwing 65 miles an hour. They were untouchable on the mound. They played shortstop. Every time they got up, they were everybody stood up to watch them play. And then by 14, they're not even playing the game. A lot of that has to do with, some of it is you have to understand where you are in the age curve, and that's something that Little League is looking to change. That a lot of the stars you'll see in that 12-year-old year, which is a big a gauge, is a lot of those kids are kids who are young for their grade, so they're actually a grade older. Like my son is born in August. He'll be a 7th grader in his 12-year-old baseball year. So he'll be almost a full year older than some of the kids he's playing against. And in terms of physical maturity, that can make a huge difference. Then the other thing is you have kids that are early developers in terms of their maturity. Those are the ones that are, shaving in 7th grade, and they're much more physically developed than the other kids. And so they're dominant on the field during their middle school years. But once they get to freshman, sophomore year, that's it. They're done, and everybody else kind of passes them by. So there's all different levels of maturity. So it's really tough to nail down an age to say, well, if your kid's got it at 12, he's got it. Because I've seen way too many middle school wonders that really didn't turn out to be that in high school. And then there's always the famous stories of Michael Jordan not playing basketball until he was in his junior year, and he got cut from his high school basketball team. So I can't really tell you that if your kid's got a knack for it, that lock them into all year baseball, because that's going to be the ticket.
I'll nail it down to an age. Sophomore year in high school. Is my son 13 or 14? Does he have it? It for what? He hasn't played a game of varsity baseball. Are we actually thinking about college already? And I think that's a problem. We're starting to focus too far down the road. We talk about kids. He was here yesterday. He's like, can you contact these colleges for me? I said, have you pitched a varsity baseball game yet? No. I said, then what are we talking about calling Division I schools for you yet? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. They're young. We have no idea how they're going to develop maturity-wise, athletic-wise, physically. So kids can show, like you said, kids can show you great skills, and they're playing at their age level, or they're, the big famous word is they're playing up, and they're playing with kids that are a year or two older than them. Why would I want to have my kids specialize in one sport anywhere before high school? I was a football, baseball guy. I played other sports, recreational, but I was a football, baseball kid in high school. I went to high school, to St. Joe's High School, primarily for football. I mean, I knew I was going to play baseball there, but I went there as a football player. And, playing football those years, that's what helped me on the baseball field. The different movements and the different mentality and the aggressiveness and all those things helped mold me as a baseball player, helped mold me as an athlete. And then when I decided to become a baseball player, I was ready to go. It wasn't because I just stuck with that same sport. And I got to tell you, I've been dealing with baseball since 1997, training. And I love baseball. But I don't want to watch baseball year-round. I don't want to be playing baseball year-round all the time. I want to get other sports in. I want to get involved in other sports. I want to go see my kids play other sports. So when you get to sophomore year in high school, if you can see that you're at a varsity level, and that maybe there's something there, and maybe you're talking maybe scholarship money or something like that, then I think that decision could be made. But prior to that, I think kids should play multiple sports, and it's only going to help you as an athlete. So if you're thinking about doing that before high school, I think it's a big mistake. I think that your kids are going to be affected by that negatively, because again, those other sports and those other movements and different training methods, all that stuff is going to eventually mold you into what you become down the road.
Speaking of specialization, there's 2 great videos that we have shot that are going to be ready to go. Both of them are going to be free member content videos, and both of them feature a player that Steve coached at St. Joe's, Pat Kivelhan. And his story is a very cool story talking about specialization. He's a kid who went on a football scholarship to Rutgers University, then decided he wanted to go back to baseball. And after not playing baseball for 3 years, went back, started playing, and he's now considered one of the top prospects. He got drafted, and now he's one of the top prospects in the major leagues.
He's on the 40-man roster for the Texas Rangers.
So to hear his story is a pretty cool thing. So we have 2 videos featuring him that are going to be coming out when we launch. I have a bunch of questions on off-season training. And there's a bunch of different ways you can approach that. The one thing I would say is that if you just compartmentalize it into just off-season training, I think you're missing the boat. If we step back and we look at physical conditioning, all it is simply challenging your body. So if you know, we decided that Steve and I are going to go out and start a running program tomorrow, and neither of us, I can trust me, are runners. We'd probably get to the nearest mailbox and be bent over and be heaving and, you know, gasping for air. But the next day we'd go out and we'd tough through it, and we'd probably get to the end of the block. And then the next day we'd probably get around the block and eventually be getting around the neighborhood, and we'd build up. And what happens is that first day we go out, we challenge ourselves, and your body is a responsive unit. That's how we survive. Its primary motivation is just every cell in our body is to survive another day. So if you challenge it, what happens is your body says, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what you just did, but if you're going to keep doing that, I gotta be prepared to do it." So you get more circulation, you get more muscle tone, you get all these different factors, and then you respond and get more fit.
Some water? Yeah. Okay, one more question here. There needs to be a culture change in youth sports, starting with the parents. We agree on that. The win-at-all-cost mentality combined with the never-ending pressure on today's youth to constantly perform is leading to injury. It's not leading to the greater love of the game. I don't necessarily think that most people are having win-at-all-cost mentality. I also don't see a problem with teaching your kids to play to win. You know, I don't know when that went out the window. It's not about winning and losing. It's about just participating. I don't know where that came from. That's not any planet I've lived on. When you play, you want to teach your kids to win, and you want to teach them to learn how to lose. Those are 2 important factors that we're waiting way too long to teach these things to these kids. You got 10-year-old, 11-year-old kids that come into a camp and strike out and are hysterical crying about striking out in a baseball camp, you know, and it's because they're not understanding that you're going to lose sometimes, and it's okay. But, you know, I do agree that there's some people out there that, you know, that get a little bit crazy with this stuff. But I think for the most part, you know, people are trying to teach their kids the right lessons. Hey, let's go out there and win today. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a mentality. Like, if you're going to tell your kid he's got to go to practice every day, and he's got to do this, he's got to do this, what are we going out there for? You don't think kids are keeping the score? You know, I got my own kids. They know the score. They're keeping score. And there's nothing wrong with keeping score. You know, well, it might upset the other kids if they lose. It's part of life. It's part of reality. So I think sports is a great opportunity to teach kids these lessons. But we've stopped doing that over the years, you know, and I don't agree with it at all. I think that they need to learn how to win and show class when they win. And I think they need to learn how to lose. You know, I play my kids in video games when they were younger, and they don't play video games a whole lot. But I used to just, you know, let them catch up and playing baseball and beat them. I'd beat them all the time. Just and I'd talk trash and have fun with it. You know, it's not about if you lose, you're a loser. You're not a loser if you lose. You lost a game. It's a game, you know. But there's lessons to be learned in that. And again, some people do take it, you know, to the end. But you know, those people, they stand out like a sore thumb. I mean, those people that get crazy, it's pretty obvious. But I think for the most part, it's okay to teach our kids to want to win. It's okay to teach our kids that, you know, we're walking in this tournament. We're looking to win this tournament. It's okay to get kids fired up. It's okay to get kids passionate about wanting to play and want to do the best for their team and help their team win. That is all good stuff. So, you know, my advice to people is keep doing it. Let your kids know that there's a winner and there's a loser, and it's always going to be that way. And again, just because you lose doesn't mean you're a loser. Okay. Well, a couple things with that is there's a great comedian, and I wish I could remember his name. I just saw a skit that he did, George Carlin,
and he talks about how he his brother showed up at his daughter's softball game, and his brother says to him, so what's the score? And a mother steps up and says, it's having fun to having fun. And so he turned to his brother and said, well, so far we've had fun 5 times. They've only had fun 2 times. Okay. And it was a great line, but it really speaks to, and it was funny because Steve and I have come from different places, but we mesh in a lot of different ways in terms of our philosophies. As I always coach kids that baseball is a game of mistakes. And you were just saying the other day, baseball is a game of failure. So it's the same kind of concept. If a guy gets a hit, the pitcher made a mistake, right? Or somebody in the field made a mistake because they didn't field the ball. So there's a mistake happening every single pitch. So you have to be, it's how you deal with those mistakes and how you minimize those mistakes is really how you get good at this game. But there's going to be mistakes. If you get up 10 times and you don't get hit 7 of them, you're in the Hall of Fame. Okay, so that's where learning how to deal with these mistakes, and it ties in with another question we have here is, how do I teach players to be more aggressive at the plate and less scared? Well, what are they scared of? As Steve said earlier, are they scared of failing you? Are they scared of being mocked by their friends because they're not going to get a hit?
Getting drilled with a pitch?
Yeah, so some of those things are we have to figure out what are they scared of. And in a lot of times you can acquiesce those fears by addressing those head on and tying it full circle to where I think winning and the winning approach, and I've seen it with my own son's teams, where it can get lost is where you're winning at the expense of players, okay? Whether you're winning at the expense where I have an article that we'll have posted about an experience that I had with a team my son played who they had the 2 pitchers that day who pitched in the championship game. We had seen them pitch in another – they were in 2 leagues, this team. They pitched in the day before. The pitcher who came in and was their starter threw I think it was 90-something pitches. Less than 24 hours ago in their championship game the day before, he threw 50-something pitches. The pitcher who came in to relieve him threw, I think, 40 to 50 pitches. He had thrown 100 pitches a day before. Okay, so – they were going at all costs, regardless of what was going to happen to these kids' arms at 11 years old, just so they can win a plastic medal. That's where it gets wrong. Where it gets wrong is you're not looking at the betterment of the development of your players or team, because we're only going to play the quote unquote good players. And we're going to keep parking, these other kids down at the bottom of the lineup and maybe give them 1 at bat. So now you're going to take a kid who gets 1 at bat a game. You're going to put him up in a pressure situation where he has 0 experience. Now he's more nervous because he knows he's quote unquote not one of the good kids. And how do you expect them to do well, right? They don't have the experience in these situations. They know that you don't think they do, and they don't have the confidence in them. And so they're just set up to fail. And so not saying that everybody gets a turn or everybody's treated equally, but at the same time, you have to look at the betterment of the overall development of your players as baseball players, and not looking at it to say we're going to do whatever we have to do, and regardless of what it does to these young kids, just so we can get a plastic medal.
And again, there are absolutely people out there like that, and there's not a lot of them, but one is too many, So we definitely want to make sure that if our kid is on a team like that, let him keep the money. Don't even ask the refund. Just walk away and don't ever go back. Year-round throwing. Is year-round throwing harmful or healthy? I throw pretty much all year round. My arm never hurts. It depends on what you did. If let's say you're a high school junior and you're the ace of the staff and you throw 70 innings in the spring and you did your winter training, you got yourself fully conditioned for it, and you pitch all the high-profile games and you do 70 innings. Then you go out in the summertime and you throw another 60 innings. Now you go in the fall, how much throwing should you do? Well, if I threw that much in the spring and then that much in the summer, then I should be really kind of weaning it off, maybe throwing an inning here or there, really focus more on throwing bullpens and side sessions. But it's okay to throw year round. I saw this thing by a doctor sent something out. You should take 4 months off from completely throwing a baseball at all. And I don't think that doctors fully understand that there's different types of throwing. So if I did that type of throwing as that high school kid, how is it going to really hurt my arm if I'm standing 40 feet away from the net and I'm just basically throwing the ball 50%, 25, two rounds of 25, 50 throws, just to kind of keep my arm conditioned, try to keep my mechanics in sync, try to keep my arm action smooth. You're not really pulling through the ball, you're not really pulling down through it, you're not really trying to snap it off. You're just basically playing catch to keep everything conditioned. So if you do it the right way, and again, we have video and information on all the stuff and all these questions that will be available to you. But it's okay to throw year round as long as you're doing it moderately, as long as you're spreading it out. You're throwing 2 or 3 days a week where you're just playing catch into a net in your garage, and you have a 15-foot distance between the front of your garage and the back of your garage, and you just step in and throw. You just keep things conditioned. It's when you start to get the high-intensity throws. It's when you're constantly overloading your muscles and constantly stretching your tendons and ligaments to the point of failure that you're really creating damage. But it's okay to throw year-round just to keep things conditioned, but you just have to make sure that it's all based on what you did in the prior seasons.
And it's somewhat to what I was talking about before, just with off-season conditioning. If you lose that stimulus of challenging yourself, your body says, well, I guess I don't need this attribute anymore, and so you lose strength. And so whether it's you just have this off-season program where you get real strong and fit, and then you stop doing it, so you're getting weaker as the season goes on, as the games are getting more competitive, or as Steve said, you stop throwing, you're basically telling your body, I don't necessarily need this arm strength anymore. There's a big difference, as Steve said, between throwing and pitching. We're coming up against it with time here, getting up to 8 o'clock. Sorry we couldn't get to all your questions, but we will get to them at some point, either in the videos that are already done or videos that we're going to add because of the questions you sent in. So thank you again for myself in providing us with a ton of good content that we'll be giving right back to you in the weeks to come. What you can expect from the Baseball Health Network over the next couple weeks is we're going to be taking this video, in case you missed any part of it, this video will be posted on our website as well as part of our free member content. We'll have that up as soon as possible. We are going to be launching, as I said earlier, our top 5 things that all pitchers should do, where each of us as the BHN founding partners did a video. Steve has one on playing catch properly. I have one on talking about the push-up. Dr. Ahmad does one on some of the Tommy John risk. Doug Sinella does one on how to throw your fastball consistently for strikes. And then Steve and I did our final one just talking about physical preparedness and being an athlete as a pitcher. Those will all be free. Those will be launching one a day starting next Monday. If you go to our website, baseballhealthnetwork.com, you can sign up to get access to those videos. January 11th at 9 a.m., we go live, and you're able to access all of our videos. We'll have 2 tiers of membership. We'll have a free membership. We'll have access to a ton of different information and videos and articles. And then we'll also have a premier membership where we have over 20 premier videos that are on all those topics we've been talking about that will be launched on day 1. And we're adding 5 to 10 new videos every single month. So there's a ton of value added in that. And you can do either a monthly or yearly membership. So once again, I'm Eric DAgati from Baseball Health Network. I can't thank you enough for your participation, and we look forward to having you on board.
Yeah, and I want to thank you too. I mean, getting all these questions is great. I've had this vision along with Dr. Ahmad about 10 years ago, and it's finally coming to fruition. And my goal is to help as many people as possible. I mean, the people that know me out there, like I'm about helping kids and helping their families kind of help each other, and we're all on the same page. And bringing the medical community and the baseball community and the training community all together, which it hasn't really been that way, which is the reason why kids are going untreated and undiagnosed and not recovering as fast as they can. All of this stuff is to help you. All of this stuff is to help as many people as we can. And I'm so fired up that this is finally happening. And I'm super excited to see how many people were into this. It was like seeing all these questions was just great. And it's made the work I've done for the past 17 years, Doug and I here at PBI, Eric at his place, it's made it all worth it because, we know the effect that this program is going to be able to offer you. And, from A to Z, when it comes to your baseball and your baseball training and just your overall mental and physical health, being able to help people is what I was put on this planet for. So I really appreciate it. And, again, check out the website. Was it the 8th you said? Right?
We're all a little sleep deprived here, folks, from staying up and getting these videos ready. But yes, starting next Monday, okay, the 4th through the 8th, 1 video per day of our top 5 will be released, and then the 11th, everything's full go. and we're ready to go. So we look forward to having you there. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.